So Blender you can download from the blender.org website. Obviously for a Windows installer, I would just download the latest version, and I can select other versions here as well. So to save time, I've already got that on my desktop. So I'm going to open Blender, and we're going to move on to the Blender side of our tutorial. So when Blender opens up, you will have a default scene load in, and this will include things like a camera, a cube, and a light. So I'm going to click off this center prompt, and you'll see the cube and the camera and the light. They will all be individually selected. So the default workspace that we're going to be using is layout. So that's this one up here. There are a number of other options that you can choose from, but we're going to just stick to layout, keep it simple. So inside the main window is the 3D viewport, which is where we're going to be constructing our scene. And the scene collection, this window up here, contains all the objects that are within our scene. So we don't need these camera, cube, and light objects, so we're going to be getting rid of them shortly. The next window is the properties window. So we're going to click on this little icon here, and it's going to show us things that we can change and transform within our scene. So in our layout window, we're going to select our cube. We're going to press the delete button, and it's going to disappear because we don't need a cube. We also don't need the camera or the light as well. So we're going to delete those as well. So select and delete. Okay, so our scene is now empty. We're going to move on now to importing our wavefront OBJ file. So we're going to go File, Import, and we're going to select wavefront OBJ. So we're going to load a wavefront OBJ file. Now we're going to have to navigate to our 3D projects folder. So here's our 3D project, and we're going into Model, Mesh Room Cache, Texturing, Long Alphanumeric String, and we're going to select our OBJ. So then we're just going to import as standard. We're going to do all of the editing and changing ourselves. So that may take a moment to come in. And there's our model. Okay, so it's grey, it's blobby, and it's in the wrong orientation. We're going to fix that. And it's orange because it is selected. And in our scene collection, the textured mesh has now been imported, and underneath that you can see our textured mesh with the textured atlas underneath. So these are the files that we are going to be working with. So we really only need to be selecting our textured mesh. Okay. So now that we've got our textured mesh in, we're going to save our file. So we go into save in File, Save As, and we're going to go back to our 3D project folder and go into and save this project into Blender. So you can call it whatever you want. I'm just going to call this model. Oops. Model. And that will then save inside our 3D project in our Blender folder as a .blend file. So that is our Blender project. Okay, so now we can move on to do some editing. So you can move around the scene by holding your mouse scroll wheel and moving your mouse, and that will rotate the camera about, and it will zoom in and out. And you can also select your orientation using this gizmo up in the top. So looking down from Z, X, and Y, you can orientate yourself in your scene. You can also use the hand here to move the view about. So navigating in Blender is a little bit different, but it's not impossible to do. So our first job is to rotate our model correctly. And we're going to do that by obviously selecting our model, our textured mesh up here, selecting the rotate function, and we're going to move it on the y-axis, the green axis there. Okay, and if we click on Y, you can see the model moving around. If we click on X, we can then move it on the X axis using the red wheel, just nudging it about. And if we look down on the Z-plane, we can see that we're more or less orientated flat. Okay, so the piece of the model that we're actually interested in, if I zoom in and I move the camera over it, is our statue down here, our Mao statue. If I just get that into the middle. And everything else around this can now be removed. So if you select the Z plane, it's probably better to look down on the area that you're interested in keeping. So if we are selected, everything is orange on the outlines, we can then start editing. So if we move now up to this drop down menu up here, we're going to come out of object mode, which is where we're just looking and moving stuff around, to edit mode. And this is where we're going to start making changes to our model. And this is where we're going to start cutting out all of the other stuff and basically reducing our model down to the bits that we want. Okay, so the window is now going to change to show us the editable model, and you'll see all of these triangles basically. And if we zoom out, you can see there's a lot of extra triangles that we don't need. And there is a dense amount of triangles around the object of interest. So our statue in the middle has a lot of points. And so we just want to save that section there. So if you press C on your keyboard, your cursor will turn into a circle. And the circle is everything inside the circle is what you're going to select, and everything outside is not going to be selected. And you can change the size of the circle by using your mouse wheel. So if you scroll up on your mouse wheel, you can capture everything that you want to keep within the circle. Okay, so to get rid of the circle, you have to press Escape, and you'll go back to just a normal cursor. So one of the things that we want to do is not only do we want to select all of the object that we want to keep within the circle, but we want to pass through the 3D model. So we want to select everything not only on the surface but behind it as well. And so we use this button up here, which is the toggle Xray. You're going to toggle your Xray on, and now everything that you select, you're going to select everything within the circle, not just everything on the surface of the circle. Okay, so let's press C, select our circle, and we're going to keep not only the statue but a little bit of the surrounding area as well, just to give us some grass and to give us a bit of the surrounding scene to keep as well. So select, and everything now will turn orange. Now the important thing to do here is to not press the left mouse button again, because you'll start selecting more objects outside. You need to press Escape to return your cursor to normal. Okay, so we've got this area selected, and you'll see that it has not selected outside of the window there. So the layout window is cut off our circle. And that's not a problem, right? So if you make a mistake with your selection, you can undo it by deselecting the orange bit basically and returning it to normal, and reselecting again with your circle tool. So you can go to select none, and then you're gone back to normal and you can start again. Okay, so let's press C. This is our circle, and everything inside the circle is now going to be selected, just like so. Okay, so we want to keep that bit in the middle, and so we want to invert our selection. So don't forget to press escape to return your cursor to normal. Go to select and invert. You can use the shortcut here once you get a bit faster with this. So you can select A to select everything, Alt A to select none, and Control I to invert your selection. And that's what we're going to do now. We're going to invert our selection. So everything outside the circle is now selected. And that's great because we don't want anything outside of the circle. So we just want to delete it. So to delete this, you just press delete on your keyboard and it'll ask you what you want to delete. And we want to delete the vertices as such. And now we're left with our little island or circle of our object. So now that when we move around, you'll see that there are other things. So there's remnants of the extra material still in our model, and we now want to get rid of those extra bits. So it looks to me like it's everything below the grass. For some reason there's this extraneous material underneath. So let's move our model back to the center and try and level out our terrain a bit more. So let's go back to object mode, object. We're going to select our move function and we're going to move it in the Z plane. So we're going to move it up. I'm going to look at it from this angle, and it looks like we need to rotate again. So I'm just going to rotate on the Y. Let's bring our cursor back. Move our cursor there, and you can see all of this extra material underneath now. So because we're still in Xray mode, I can see through the model, but that's okay. We still want to start removing this extra material. So let's go back to the Y plane. Let's go back to edit mode, and this time we're going to use a box to select. So this is not the circle this time, but a box. So if you press B on your keyboard, you'll see these lines come up, and you can then make a box on your selection, a box selection, and then you let go, and now you have everything. So this time you don't have to press escape to remove the box tool. It will just disappear by itself. Okay, so again, same trick. We just have everything selected and we're going to press delete and delete vertices. And this will, again, get rid of all of that extra material underneath our model. There's a little bit remaining. You can either take the time to delete that, or you can leave it there. I'm going to have another go and take off another slice of this extra material. Okay, so if you go too far and you select too much, like that, if you delete that, you're going to delete some of your scene as well. So you can see that there's extra things that have been selected there that I don't want to delete. So I'm going to go to select none, and then back to the beginning, reset without any problems. So I'm going to try again, press B. I'm going to create a box to trim off some of this extra material, not too much, just enough to save us a couple of points. Just check that I haven't selected too much. I could probably select a bit more, I think, there. Okay, so I'm going to go B, select that much of it. I'm going to hit delete to delete the vertices. Okay, I'm happy with that. There is a lot less material there. You can see there's nothing really causing us any grief. and we're now ready to just take a look at our model. So let's go back to object mode up here. We're going to zoom in and put our model in the center. And we're going to turn off X-ray mode here. So this is our model. This is a solid object now with the extra material removed. And I'm going to select the circle, it's like a sphere up here called Viewport Shading. And that's just going to put our texture on our model so that we can take a look at what it looks like. And that's quite intense on your machine to do so. So we don't really want to edit or move our object around whilst it's in this mode because it's very computationally heavy. But it's okay for us to just check out our model and to see that we haven't cut off something that we shouldn't have. So our next task is to reduce the number of points and faces in the model to make it easier to work with. So let's put our model back into solid mode up here. So viewport shading as a solid. And just so you know that you can go to the wireframe here, and the wireframe will give you an idea of what the next stage is all about. So you see there's a lot of these points, a lot of these triangles in this model. In fact, there's way too many for us to realistically use inside of AltSpace VR. So we're going to address that now. Okay, so let's go back to our transform window down here, and we're going to select the modifiers. So we're going to click on the spanner, and we're going to add the Decimate option here. Okay, so our Decimate function is going to reduce the number of faces that we have. And you can see the face count is currently pretty high. It's 1.5 million faces, thereabouts. And we're going to make that a lot lower. So we're going to make it a lot lower by starting off by putting in 0.05. Okay, so that's going to think about doing that. So you might see that your Blender programmer is not responding. It's just crunching numbers, and just like that, the number of faces, so the face count is now 75,000, and that's a bit more manageable. Now you might want to play with this because the more faces you have, the more detail there is in your model. However, the more detail there is in your model, the larger the files are to work with. So in this case, I'm happy with 75,000, and that's going to make this model a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to make this a solid, and you can see that it still has its shape. There's still a statue in the middle. It's still got a lot of detail on it. You know, you can still make out the shapes of the statue, the hands, the little fella down here, and the nose and the brows, etc. As well as having all of the grass there as well. So let's take a quick look at our material preview. Yeah, it looks fairly well detailed to me. And so we can then move on to setting the origin point of the model. So the middle bit of the model is where, when you do the rotate function and the scale and the move, it does it from a central point. And we're going to make the central point of this model, so the center is currently off to the side. We're going to change the center to the middle of the statue. So we're going to go Object, Set Origin, And we're going to set the origin to the center of mass. Take a moment to think about it. And you can see now the center has moved. And that's not quite in the center for us. So we are going to then choose the cursor. And that's this little circle thing here. We're going to place the cursor in the middle of our statue. And that's not quite in the middle. So let's go move the cursor here. Let's check it out on the Z plane. Okay, not quite. Yeah, let's just check that again. Okay, so it's at the top of his head. I'm okay with it there at the top of his head. That's a little bit more central than it was. Okay, so we're going to go back to Object, Set Origin, and this time we're going to set the origin to the 3D cursor. And I'll have a little think about that. And now the origin is set to the middle of my model's head. Okay, great. So that's pretty much everything we need to do in Blender. You have set the origin, you've got rid of all of the extra material, and you've decimated. The final sort of task now is to move this to a separate file for importing into Unity, sorry. So if you apply your decimation, that will permanently decimate your model. And again, that might take a moment. And we're going to go to File, Export, and we're going to export as an OBJ. So we imported an OBJ and we're going to export an OBJ now. All right. So we're in our 3D project in the Blender folder, and we're going to create an OBJ here, and we're going to click Export. And that might take a few moments to do as well. But we're fairly quickly done there. Okay, so next up, we want to save our .blender file. And we want to now move on to using Unity.